Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the official History of Palladium Books. I'm JM, and I'm here with Kevin as always, and we are talking today, continuing our, the hidden history of the Defilers, talking about this campaign. And Kevin, let's talk the Mad God. What is the story behind the Mad God?
So it's you know how gamers are. They're especially when you got 26 of them. You know, they're always going off and doing things, and they always surprise you. And I'll tell you, one of the fun things is a lot of people go, "Oh my God, you ran 26 players on a regular basis. That's insane." But one of the cool things about 26 players is that inevitably somebody is going to do something that gives you, as the game master, wonderful opportunities to mess with the player group.
Right.
And there's a lot of fun things that happened. And the Mad God happened a little bit later. The group had already been exploring level 1. And they discovered that there are all kinds of crazy, weird things in the Palladium of Desires, but that didn't throw them anymore. Well, it kind of still did, but so they had already discovered a demon mirror, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and they had discovered Greta's, which was a brothel near the entrance, and they had discovered Belinda's, which was an S&M place you don't want to go to. One of those players made that mistake. His character disappeared for like a year and a half, like player time. And it was crazy. It was like 10 years, or at least 5 years, Palladium time, when the group finally rescued him. And it was crazy stuff. So anyways, they're going around all over the place. And they had already found the room that had the Endless Forest. Mm-hmm. They had to go like around in a maze. It was like a square maze, and there was a door at every junction, so you had to keep opening all these doors. And you finally get to the last one, you open it up, and there's this wilderness as far as the eye can see. Well, they arguably wisely decided not to explore that world, that they weren't ready for that, which was good, because they were all like, at this point, they're all like second, fourth level characters, and they would have been fine, but probably smart. And so they find this temple of an unknown god. And they, I'm actually looking at my original notes.
Oh, it's fantastic.
And so basically it was this weird behemoth of a creature, the statue of this god. It's got 4 legs. It's got multiple tentacles. Across from it is a blood-smeared altar with blood splattered all over the floor near the temple. There's like this gold tabernacle. They explore and they check stuff out, and they open up the tabernacle, and they find a wand, and they're all excited. Woohoo! And I want to see if there was some kind of inscription. Oh, I see. Yeah. That's right. So the creature, like I said, it's a big oversized. It's like 20 feet tall. So, of course, the 2 thieves in the group climb up on top, because the eyes, and they're all surprised that, gosh, I can't believe this hasn't been picked over, but maybe no one found it. This temple is kind of off to the side, and it's kind of little.
Yeah.
And blood on an altar and stuff, and it happens. So 2 of them climb up, and they're trying to pry the eye.
I think there's a famous cover that sort of looks like that.
It's actually, I don't think it was an inspiration, but it might have been. And although different creature, different god.
Yeah.
and they're trying to pry this open. And of course, meanwhile, someone opens up the tabernacle and pulls out the wand, and they're like, "Oh wow, this is cool. I wonder what this wand does." And it kind of like moves their hand and it points to the statue, and this beam of light goes out from the crystal that was at the end of the wand, and suddenly the statue comes to life. And I do believe a non-player character they had encountered earlier had said, "Whatever you do, just leave that statue alone. Don't touch it." And of course, they touched it. And so there's two guys on top of it when this thing comes to life. And it's just like, "Aah!" And I kind of picture it sort of like the creature from, if it had tentacles and stuff. I just picture this huge maw and these eyes, these glowing eyes, and sort of like the id creature from Forbidden Planet.
Yeah.
So with four legs, it's just kind of like, "Aah!" And the group's like, "Ah!" You know, the guys are right on its face. You know, it grabs one and throws him. The other guy leaps off. And they hadn't pried the gems out yet, so it still had eyes. And, you know, someone in the group tries to talk to, a priest, big mad god. And that's when I realized, oh, man, this god is insane. You can't reason with it. You can't talk to it. And it just starts chasing people. Anyways, everyone scatters. And it's going after the one guy who had leaped off and had tried to pry the eye out. And so he's running, and the god's like, "Roar!" And of course, they slam the door behind them, and guys are diving behind the altar and all kinds of stuff, and turning invisible. I turned invisible. Can it see me? It doesn't seem to. It's after this other character. So it's after this character named Arksam, and Arksam is runs, and the creature just smashes through the door and bellows again and goes chasing after him down the hall. And he's like, "Oh shit, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do?" And he goes to the room where the forest is, but you gotta go through the maze. And we were still playing D&D. This is very early on in the Palladium campaign. So D&D had a rule that every time which I always thought was kind of a dumb rule, but it was beautiful in this particular instance. So you get to a door in D&D, original D&D, or some version of D&D that we were playing. You had to roll a 6-sided die to see if you opened the door, which I always thought was kind of crazy because it's like you turn the frickin' knob. How difficult is it?
Right.
I opened the door. So I never really played with that rule, except I was this time. And so the guy opens up the door, slams it shut, keeps running. He runs up to and it's a short little maze kind of thing. And he hears the door behind him shatter. I said, no. The player was a gentleman named Tony Falzon. And I'm like, "Tony, you hear this? You hear the thing? Boom, boom, boom. Crash through the door. And it bellows. And he's like, ah! And he keeps fumbling his roll. And it's like, roll 6-sided, Tony. Oh no, I fumbled a roll. You hear it coming, boom, 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 boom. And he would get the door open, slam it shut, run to the next door, repeat, crash. And so he's running and running and running and running. And he gets to this door, and he just keeps fumbling, and he hears the boom, 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 and it stops. And he goes, I said, "You don't hear the footsteps anymore." I go like, he's like, "What? I don't hear it?" And I said, "No, you feel its fetid breath on the back of your neck." And he lets out a shriek. Ear piercing. We were playing on the Wayne State campus at the time. And it was I forget whether it was a hot summer. I think it was a hot spring day evening, and we had the windows opened because it was so warm. And Tony lets out this shriek, and we all laugh. And he's able to elude the guy. He opens up the door, and It sees the wilderness and he tries to shut it behind it and he doesn't. And, he goes running back down. The old doors are smashed open, so he just runs and the thing comes running after him and they end up fighting the creature and the Defilers end up defeating it. I think when they reduced it to a certain amount of hit points, it turns back into a statue. So that's cool. The fun part was a few minutes later, the Wayne campus police show up.
Because they heard the shriek.
They want to see the girl who was screaming. And we all point to Tony. And he's like, and we all start to laugh. And, thankfully they quickly realize that there's nothing nefarious going on and that it was not a girl at all. It was this guy who's caught up in this silly fantasy game. Yeah. We explained what happened and
gave you the stink eye and
yeah. Then they're like, hold it down. No more screaming. We're like, well, I can't speak for everyone, but
right.
Well, so it's great, and it's one of those beautiful role-playing moments that, I built up that tension so much, and when it's like you feel its fetid breath on the back of your neck, you just shrieked.
That's awesome.
I mean, it was a shriek. I mean, it was one of those high-pitched classic girl screams.
The Wilhelm scream. One of the things I always loved about Palladium books is you never shied away from going, like, there was never concentric circles of difficulty where it's like, okay, well, this circle here is for first level and this is for third and this is for 5. Right. I think back to the Place of Magic where it's like, hey, if your players go down this route, they're screwed. And yet there was always a way to outthink or overcome very tough combat encounters through clever role play, through clever application of skills. And it sounds like that comes directly out of the Defilers campaign, because literally everything you've been talking about, you threw whatever sort of game balance was in the game, which was little at the beginning of our hobby, right? But like right out the window, and you're like, oh, hey, this is where you guys wandered. All right, now you got to deal with a mad god. That's
well, exactly. I mean, I would warn them. I'd give them an idea what they're headed for, so they knew there was some kind of mad god up ahead, and not to mess with the temple. But of course they do, which again is kind of like classic storytelling. There's 26 guys, so I have to have something that's a challenge for 26 players, or at least half that number if the group is split up. And, but yes, I don't think it's cool to kill characters. Now I should say, and I've never been in one of his games where it's happened, but Carmen Belair, one of our freelance writers, Carmen is a great game master from all accounts. He's certainly an excellent player, an excellent writer, game designer. But he is got a reputation for being a killer game master. But people love it. I mean, he would actually run tournament games at the Palladium open houses where the goal was to die in a spectacular, cool way. And if you didn't die in his game, because he'd run like 8 people.
Yeah.
If 2 or 3 or 4 survived, it'd be like, oh, bad game. Because it's like, and I guess he killed people in really interesting and heroic ways.
Yeah.
What I could ascertain. So people loved to die in some, flamboyant last-ditch effort to save the rest of the group or the innocent people or whatever. But I tried not to be a killer game master myself. And I have found that people die. Let me rephrase that. I have found that characters die
Yeah, never kill your players. That we're strictly against that at Palladium Books.
Yep, guns, knives, strangulation, poison, all out.
Yeah,
just tolerate them when they drive you crazy.
that's right.
Remember, they'll have their good moments. But I have found, and I never shied away from killing a player who played foolishly or did have one of those heroic moments and said, Kevin, I'm going to sacrifice my character for the betterment of the group or for the innocent people. Because that's, again, just classic fantasy role playing.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not going to take that away from somebody.
I run the same thing. I roll all my dice in the open. My friend Molly, who you've met, made buttons that said I played in my character died in JM's game, and all I got was this stupid button. And everyone at my table has multiple versions of it. But they all know if you come to me in the moment and say, I want X and I'm willing for my character to die, I will move heaven and earth to give you X. Because if you're willing for your character to die, then by God, this is why we're here, right? Like, we're here for these moments.
So getting back to your question about, gee, Kev, you weren't worried about game balance or whatever. You always gave the guys an out. I think that really comes from kind of classic literature and mythology and comic books.
Yeah.
The superhero group, whether it's the X-Men or the Avengers or whatever, they would get in trouble. They'd get their asses kicked, and they would retreat and regroup. And it'd be even cooler if some of them got, captive, and the group had to save, Reed Richards or Tony Stark, whoever, or a couple other comrades. But how the big bad guy just, beat the living snot out of us. How can they succeed? Tune in next issue. Yeah. And I would have a lot of times the game is, worked around themselves, but there are a lot of times where I would end it at that junction and give the group a chance to come back next week prepared for combat and hear their big plan. They always had these big elaborate plans, which sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. But, again, that's part of the fun of it, right? And, but I always wanted to give them an out.
Yeah.
I always felt that, I hated things where, you stepped on the magic ward, roll versus death. Oh, you failed, roll up your new character. That's it's not fun. Yeah. I really want to emphasize the fun. Mm-hmm. It's a game. It's supposed to be fun. It's a storytelling game. Yeah. So give them options. Let them get neck deep into crap, but then try to give them, a solution, give them a couple of possible ways out. And I love doing that. I always try to do that. So, but people died in my early days of running the Defiler campaign. The rumor was that A, I was a killer game master, and B, I ran an X-rated dungeon. Which, neither one was true, although people did die, and, well, there are brothels, but didn't get into the X rating stuff.
Yeah.
It's wonderful what, when you say, oh, hey, this beautiful woman comes up and she pets you on the side of your cheek and she's like, hey, handsome, why don't you come in here with me? And, we're all 20-somethings, right? And they're like, yeah. And you shut the door. And 20 minutes later, you come out and you had the greatest sex ever. And they're like, oh, wow, that was fantastic. That was amazing. It's like, there was nothing there. It's all in your head. But
it's all in your everything from the moment we faded to black till the moment we came back to the game. That exists only in your head, and nobody wants to be in on.
That's exactly. Yeah. But people would go out and go, oh, this is amazing. So
tell me about the Demon Mirror. And then I want to know, things like, we talked a little bit about how the Palladium of Desires was sort of the seed that eventually germinated out into Palladium Fantasy and the Megaversal system and Rifts. did anything of the Mad God or the Demon Mirror, did any of that make it into any Palladium books?
Actually, no. And that's why I have people all the time saying, Kev, you've got to do the Palladium of Desire. And for a long time, I think it just felt too close and personal.
Yeah.
Because, I had a very special relationship with those 26 guys.
Yeah.
We played in that world for 3.5 years. As I mentioned before, we would run from like 7 o'clock in the evening till 8 or 9 the next morning, Sunday morning. So I mean, we spent a lot of time together. Plus, they would call me in between and bounce ideas off about their character, or can my character do this while we're waiting in town, and blah blah blah. And I became very good friends with at least a half a dozen of those guys, probably more like most of them. And over the years, we did drift apart, most of us, but they were just a great group of guys, and they challenged my storytelling frequently, which I loved.
Right.
It was just great stuff, really. And but a lot of the stuff, because I had such fond memories about the story and this guy and that guy, that I just had trouble bringing it to share with the world, if that makes sense.
It was such a personal...
It really was.
Yeah.
Because I really grew during this too. I mean, I grew up poor. I grew up, I didn't have a ton of confidence. It was weird. It's like I had confidence in certain ways, like nothing was going to deter me from something once I latched on to that idea or that plan, that goal. Especially, to become a creator, writer, artist. But I was also kind of shy and insecure. Like I would write this stuff and I'm like, I don't know. Oh gosh, JM, is it any good?
Yeah, no, I get that.
And nowadays, because I have, I'm very accomplished. I've got 200 books under my belt or more. It just seems like, oh yeah, he's like the Stan Lee of gaming. He's created all these worlds and hundreds of characters, and of course he has his shit together and knows what he's doing. He's always been this bold, and I guess I always was sort of bold and brazen. I had someone in college say that I was brazen and impudent, and I'm like, yeah, exactly. I'm like,
I like that. Yeah,
that's right. I'm a maverick. Being impudent isn't necessarily the greatest thing all the time, and I think with that brazenness came sort of a certain brashness and hardness, which over the years I think I softened considerably and learned to be much more empathetic and passionate and compassionate about other people and writing and the arts and everything I do. But it was pretty cool. And so for a long time it just felt too personal, and then for a while I sat back and went, to make it work as a game for a broader audience, I would have to tone down a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that's true to a point, but it would still have all the flavor. I've really, in the last 4 or 5 years, I've really kind of changed my tune on, no, we can never do the Defilers. And also because of this, I dug up all of my copious notes, and that's just a tiny fraction of it.
Yeah.
And I'm reading this stuff and I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. Oh yeah, that was a cool thing. Oh man, the time loop, that's epic. In fact, we should talk about that at some point as one of the tales of the Defilers. But there were just so many cool characters and so many cool moments. And it's just like, I can do this and make it fun and for a larger audience. So down the road, no time soon.
That's right. No promises.
I've got
a solid maybe.
I got a dozen books I got to get out before I can even think about doing that. But I think I would love to at some point. And,
awesome.
I think it'll be epic and fun, and we'll see what happens.
Well, before we get into the Demon Mirror, then let's talk about time loops.
No, let's talk about the Demon Mirror.
Okay, let's do the Demon Mirror.
Because the Demon Mirror is awesome. It's on level 1. And again, it's one of those things where you would think well, gee, this is a really powerful thing. We shouldn't, it shouldn't be made available to low-level characters, and because basically the demon mirror, as the group figured out, was a wish mirror device. So you would go in and you would ask it for something, and it would grant it to you. Now the problem is, and as most wish stuff is difficult for some people. I guess my sardonic and
impudent nature, your brazen
nature would come out, and people would be terrified. It got to the point where someone would, a new player would come in, and they'd be like, what's down this hall? And it's like, you don't want to go down there. The demon mirror is there. And it's like, the demon mirror, what's that? And they would foolishly go, well, it's a wish mirror, so that's all the guy hears after that.
Right, no. Exactly.
And they're like, but you don't want to go there. You don't want to do it. It'll twist your wish. Trust us. We've all tried, which wasn't true, but I'd say 8 or 10 of them tried, and they would all get messed up. Alex's character, two different characters got pretty messed up by it. It's interesting because things always got twisted. So, for example, it was kind of, so when you first go down the hall, it's like this little annex. It's like a hall between two other halls with rooms on either side, but there's no doors.
Yeah.
And in the middle of this short hallway is this black mirror. And you look into it, and it's got a glossy, shiny surface, and it's a mirror, and it's this nice frame.
Yeah.
But the mirror is black, and you can't remove it from the wall. You can't shatter it. It appears to be completely impervious to any sort of attack. And when you start to disturb it, like a Wizard of Oz kind of demonic face starts to appear, and smoke kind of starts to arise, and you can smell, sulfur and brimstone, and it's like, what do you want? Who dare disturbs my rest? And it'd be like, oh, I'm so-and-so. And it's like, a stinking knight. I hate knights. The only thing worse than a knight is a paladin. And of course, the paladin group kind of steps away.
Right. No, of course. Yeah.
Hides behind, the thief or somebody. And, and it's always insulting. It's always nasty. It's always full of bluster. But when you finally say, so who are you? What is your and it doesn't matter who I was in life. I am now cursed. I am cursed to grant whatever fool asked of me. And they're like, ooh, so you grant like wishes? And it's like, yes, that's what I said. How stupid are you? Be gone, you pieces of garbage. You're here in the Palladium of desires. What you must desire is death, because that's what awaits you here. And it tries to scare them off and kind of dissuade them from asking into anything, or kind of just changing the subject. And so finally, when you ask it something, it will grant you your wish, but it will twist it whatever way it can. And sometimes it's cool because it doesn't have to really twist anything. And the guys were always trying to figure out ways. Like they would sit there, the whole frickin' group, 26 guys, someone would write down what they're going to ask the demon mirror. And they'd all go over it. They're all young, early 20s. So, and none of them are professional writers even today. So, they'd go through it and go, yeah, I think this is perfect. And sometimes they would insist on reading it to me and not hand it to me. Other times they would hand it to me. And, a misplaced comma can be handy.
Oh, yeah.
A misspelling can be handy. An awkward turn of phrase, whether they're reading it or writing it. So we had some epic stuff. So one of the classics was they go in, they want to explore level 3, but they've heard all kinds of rumors and stuff about level 3. And so someone came up with the bright idea of let's go in and ask it for a map of level 3. Well, the demon mirror is all full of bluster. So this poor player gets so flustered, he does the classic, make me a map of level 2. Poof! He becomes a map of level 2, and his sheet of parchment goes, floating down to the floor. How's this for compassion of the rest of the players?
That's
They're
fantastic.
like, what the? A map of level 2 is supposed to be a map of level 3! We already explored level 2! This map is worthless! Not, oh, poor Bob got turned into a piece of parchment. It's like, damn, he got turned into a piece of parchment, and worse, it's worthless.
It's a worthless piece of parchment. You're doubly dumb, Bob.
And so another great one, because the demon mirror, because you're interacting with it like an AI, so it responds to your tone and stuff, and people would come in and try to be, deferential and stuff, and that never really worked. And they'd come in and be, very forceful, and that didn't really work. In fact, so Alex Marcinison, the longtime editor of Palladium Books, and my best friend since 8th grade, he gives me one that I can't mess with. He wants this. I think it was a bastard sword or long sword, a big ass sword.
Yeah.
And maybe it was a claymore. And that's indestructible and does like double damage. And the demon mirror, as the game master, I can't think of how to mess with this. But the demon mirror is grumbling and mumbling about all of it and making a big production out of it. And Alex's character says, I want my damn sword. Let me have it. So it did. The sword appears right above him and goes right down his shoulder, into his body, down into his leg. And he's like, and of course, his buddies run in, rush him out. They yank it out. That's what actually kills him, is removing the sword. He bleeds out. Another time, different character. Now, by the way, I would have options in these games where people could get resurrected.
Okay.
So it's not like they're just dead. They had a pool that was where a goddess resided, and she could resurrect people and restore people and perform those kinds of magics, provided the group did some favor or quest for her first. And that was always a trip, because, it was never something easy. I mean, if a goddess is asking you to do something, it's going to be big,
right,
and dangerous. But that would lead to other adventures, which was awesome.
Right.
And then there was the Joker, and we'll get into him one of these episodes. He's a whole episode by himself, I think, who he was the protege of the Nameless Lord who created the Palladium of Desire. Rumor has it he was like a son to the Nameless Lord. And so, super powerful guy, and he would trade for souls, and he'd be happy to resurrect people, but you had to gamble. You had to gamble with basically he played blackjack. And which I thought, as a game master, that was pretty fair, because it's fast.
It's fast, easy, and it's pretty arbitrary.
And the player, actually has like a 42% chance of winning.
Yeah.
It's one of the more even gambling type games.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways there's a few ways they could get brought back to life. So I don't want people to think, oh man, he was just brutal. So another time Al goes in, and he just hands this one to me on a silver plate. He goes, all right, shut up. I don't need to listen to your stuff. And the guy would fume and whatever, and flames would actually shoot out from its eyes. Nothing that could hurt anybody. And Alex says, I want 10 million in gems. But Not a single gem worth more than 50 gold. And the demon in the mirror smiles and says, granted. And the room just fills up with gems. And by this point, the group knew better than to stand around and watch. They were out in the hall. The door pops open. The gems are spilling out into the other much larger hallways. And Alex is like buried alive. They tried to get to him, but they couldn't get to him in time, and he suffocates. His character suffocates.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, it's such a classic fairy tale, right? And the point of those fairy tales is be careful what you wish for. You know, no wish is really worth worth the cost. And yet your players kept going back. Well, maybe this time we can trick the mirror. Maybe this is the time that we can overcome something with the mirror. And they just continually over and over and over again.
Well, yeah, because there's always that sense, I can beat this.
Yeah.
I can beat this. So my favorite one of all time, and this is beautiful. So, and we can go into this story, the full story in another episode, but one of the player characters, well, actually two of the player characters got polymorphed by a polymorph wand. It was still a D&D item. And they both happened to randomly get turned into mice. And it was very interesting because one guy really leaned into being a mouse and, said, hey, if I'm a mouse, like I've got like a potion of flight.
Yeah.
Can I how much does it affect a mouse? Can I take a little sip? Do I have like 50 or 100 doses of flight? Magic potion of flying. And he would sip a little bit, and sure enough, he could fly around. And he had one of the guys, put tie a red cape around his neck, and he's like, "Look, I'm Mighty Mouse." A little out of context of the game, but
hey, we
all got the idea.
Yeah.
And the other guy had been, and this happened in the demon. So this is very appropriate. So he actually wanted at some point. He wanted to have an iron golem that he could command. So a lot of these guys started out power gamers before I tamed them and turned them into team players. So he wanted to have an iron golem that he could command, and he came to the demon mirror, and his request was such that the demon mirror interpreted that apparently very understandably because everyone laughed and thought it was cool. It turned him into an iron golem. He had been a dwarf warrior. So he gets turned into an iron golem, which as a power gamer, he loves.
Oh, yeah, no.
Loves it. I'm an iron golem. I'm like 9 feet tall or 10 feet tall, and I'm badass, and I've got like 300 hit points or whatever it was, 200 hit points. He loved being an iron golem, just loved it more than anything. Well, when he gets polymorphed into a mouse, you go from being, in his mind, like a titan of...
Yeah, the apex.
To a little itty-bitty mouse. And he was like despondent. Totally despondent. So he finally writes up, then he writes this down. He's like, Kevin, you can't mess this up. And I read this thing, and I kept it. I kept it forever.
You still have it.
Wonderful. I still have it. It's one of my favorite moments of all time in gaming. And he says, this is what it says. Demon Mirror, turn me into a dwarf of incredible skill with the axe who wears an invulnerable coat of chainmail and holds a magical axe that never misses a foe. Now. I read this and I'm like, oh, I love it. So it turned him into a dwarf with considerable skill.
Yeah.
A dwarf with the axe who wears an invulnerable coat of chainmail. So
the axe has a vulnerable coat of chainmail?
Yes. He has a battle axe in his hand. It's got 2 little arms. It's got like a mouth and some eyes. And it's this animated battle axe that's got these little arms. It's wearing an invulnerable coat of chainmail, and it holds. This is why it had to be animated and had to have arms. And the axe,
Right.
it holds a magical axe that never misses a foe. And so it holds a little hatchet that did like 1d4 or 1d6 damage that you could throw and would always hit its target. I think it was like 1d4 damage and come right back
That's
to the axe.
Right. Not to the player.
So we had Philippe. What did he call them? Both of them had, obviously, they had to have names and stuff.
Well, of course, yeah.
Because they're. So Philippe was the axe with the invulnerable coat of chainmail, and I forget what the little axe was called. And that's actually in the Defiler piece. You can see that. It's this character. It's this character right here. Next scene. So he started out Nexus, the male dwarf. When he got turned into a mouse, my guy said, "Hey, is he male or female?" And we randomly rolled 50-50 chance, and he turned into a female, which he didn't care. My guys were great players.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you can see the axe that's holding a smaller axe.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
And you can see the little smile on Philippe. And so at first he was like, "Son of a bitch!" But once he really thought about it, he's like, this is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
He played it. He had also grown as a player, and he really ran with it. And the really cool thing was the guys had fun with it. And that was one of the last times, by the way, that anyone went to the Demon Mirror. After that, it was like, we just stay away from the Demon Mirror. There'd be moments where something really bad was happening. You're like, well, maybe we could do X, Y, or Z, or get X, Y, or Z from the Demon Mirror. And people would be like, no.
Now, we have learned our lesson. There is no such thing as a free wish.
There were other incidents, but those were some of the greatest moments with the Demon Mirror.
Kevin, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing these stories. Like we've got at least 2 more Defiler episodes coming out. We'll sprinkle them in. But yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks with even more History of Palladium books.
Because the whole mouse thing turns into this epic story that almost destroyed the world.
Oh, we're covering that next time.
All right, stay tuned for Hitler Mouse.